The cantina on Nexus Station buzzed with the usual mix of traders, smugglers, and mercenaries from across the galaxy. Blue-skinned Zalani sipped fermented algae while four-armed Korthak played probability games with holographic dice. The air recyclers worked overtime, mixing a dozen different atmospheric preferences into something barely breathable for everyone. Zektar the Ruthless sat in his usual corner booth, all 8 feet of scaled muscle and cybernetic enhancement, making lesser beings give him a wide berth. His reputation preceded him wherever he went. 300 confirmed kills across 47 star systems. Species didn't matter to him. Zalani, Korthak, Vixari, even the crystalline shardlings fell the same way when he hunted them. The crimson patterns across his hide marked him as a Saurian noble, though he'd abandoned that life cycles ago for the profitable business of death. His neural implants glowed softly beneath the scarred flesh of his skull, connected to weapon systems that could level city blocks. When Zektar took a contract, the target was already dead. They just didn't know it yet. Tonight felt different, though. The usual crowd gave him even more space than normal. Conversations died when he passed. Even the station's security drones seemed to avoid his section of the cantina. Something had the galaxy's predators spooked, and that rarely happened. Another Corellian whiskey. Zektar growled to the nervous Zalani bartender, his translator collar converting the harsh clicks and hisses of his native tongue. The blue-skinned being practically teleported the glass to his table, desperate to avoid prolonged contact. As he lifted the amber liquid to his lips, a small figure approached his booth. Zektar's enhanced vision immediately cataloged the newcomer. Bipedal, roughly 5.5 feet tall, pale pink skin, bilateral symmetry. A human. One of the newest species to join the galactic community. Barely 2 cycles since first contact. The human wore simple dark clothing and carried no visible weapons, though Zektar's scanners detected metallic objects beneath the fabric. Foolish creature approaching a predator like him, either very brave or very stupid. In Zektar's experience, there wasn't much difference between the two. "Mind if I sit?" the human asked, gesturing to the empty bench across from him. The universal translator rendered the words in perfect galactic standard, though there was something odd about the human's tone. No fear, no hesitation, just casual politeness as if asking to borrow a datapad. Zektar's 4 eyes studied the small being. Humans were still a curiosity in this part of the galaxy. Their homeworld Earth lay in a distant spiral arm, and few ventured this far into established space. Those who did usually stuck to the safer central systems, not lawless frontier stations like Nexus. "Speak quickly, mammal," Zektar rumbled, gesturing with one clawed hand. "My patience has limits." The human slid into the booth with fluid grace that set off warning bells in Zektar's predator brain. The movement was too controlled, too purposeful. This wasn't some lost tourist or naive trader. "I have a proposition," the human said, placing both hands flat on the table. "A hunt that might interest someone of your reputation." Zektar's scarred lips pulled back in what other species might mistake for a smile, but was actually a threat display. "You wish to hire me? Do you have any idea who you're addressing, little creature? Former Saurian nobility, exiled for killing your clutch brother in an honor duel. 300 confirmed kills across the Outer Rim. Cybernetic enhancements worth more than most planetary defense budgets." The human's voice remained conversational, as if discussing the weather. "You're Zektar the Ruthless, the galaxy's most expensive killer." The casual recitation of his history should have impressed Zektar. Instead, it unsettled him. Information about his past wasn't exactly classified, but it wasn't common knowledge either. Who was this human and why did they know so much about him? "Impressive research," Zektar acknowledged, his neural implants automatically scanning for threats. The cantina's other patrons had moved even further away, leaving them in a bubble of nervous silence. "What makes you think you can afford my services?" The human reached slowly into their jacket and produced a small crystalline data chip. Even in the cantina's dim lighting, Zektar could see the rare minerals embedded in its structure. A Vorthan credit stick. He'd only seen a few in his long career, each one worth enough to buy a small moon. "This contains payment for 1 hunt," the human said, sliding the chip across the table. "Enough to retire comfortably if that's your preference." Zektar's enhanced vision confirmed the chip's authenticity. The embedded quantum encryption was beyond most civilizations' ability to forge. Either this human had connections to serious money, or they'd killed someone very important to get it. Who's the target? Zektar asked, his interest genuinely piqued now. Few beings in the galaxy commanded that kind of payment. Another human, came the simple reply. That gave Zektar pause. Humans were still rare enough that most galactic citizens had never seen one. For this human to want another of their kind killed suggested something personal. Family dispute, business rivalry, political assassination. The motives didn't matter to him, but the target's capabilities might. Details, he growled. The human produced a second chip, this one containing target information. Marcus Chen, former military, went rogue after some kind of incident on Earth. He's been operating as a freelance problem solver in the Tau Ceti sector. Nothing too violent, mostly information brokering and personal protection. Zektar's implants absorbed the data instantly. The target's file was remarkably thin for someone worth such an enormous bounty. Standard human physiology. No obvious augmentations, limited off-world experience. It seemed almost too easy. This Marcus Chen, Zektar said carefully. What makes him worth so much trouble? For the first time since sitting down, the human's expression changed. Something flickered behind their eyes. Not fear exactly, but a kind of wariness that Zektar recognized from his own reflection. He knows things, the human said finally. Things about human capabilities that certain parties would prefer remain secret. The way they said it sent an unexpected chill down Zektar's armored spine. In 3 centuries of hunting, he'd learned to read between the lines of client requests. This wasn't about silencing a whistleblower or eliminating a rival. This was about containing something dangerous. I accept, Zektar said, palming the credit chip. The weight of it felt right, solid, and real. Enough to fund his retirement to one of the pleasure worlds in the core systems. The human nodded and stood to leave, then paused. A word of advice, Zektar. When you find Marcus Chen, don't give him time to talk. Don't let him explain himself. Just kill him quickly and leave. Then the human was gone, vanishing into the cantina's crowd with the same unnerving grace they'd shown earlier. Zektar sat alone with his whiskey and the data chip, already planning his approach to the Tau Ceti sector. He had no way of knowing that he'd just accepted his final contract. The journey to Tau Ceti took 18 standard days aboard Zektar's personal ship, the Blood Talon. The sleek Predator-class vessel cut through hyperspace with the same lethal efficiency as its owner, armed with enough firepower to crack a moon and shielded against everything short of a direct hit from a battlecruiser. Zektar spent the transit time studying his target. Marcus Chen's file grew more puzzling the deeper he dug. Military service record showed standard infantry deployment, nothing special forces or black ops. No enhanced training, no exotic weapon certifications, no psychological flags that might indicate exceptional danger. Yet someone was willing to pay a fortune to see him dead. In Zektar's experience, that kind of money usually meant the target could fight back in ways that weren't immediately obvious. He'd made the mistake of underestimating prey exactly once in his career. The scars across his left shoulder served as a permanent reminder of that error. The Blood Talon dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Tau Ceti system, sensors immediately beginning their sweep for human-registered vessels. The system was a bustling trade hub, dozens of ships moving between the orbital platforms and the 3 habitable worlds. Finding one human among the chaos would take time and patience. Zektar began with the station records, using his considerable resources to access immigration databases and security feeds. Marcus Chen had arrived on Tau Ceti Prime 6 months ago aboard a civilian transport. Since then, he'd maintained a low profile, taking on small jobs that barely registered in the system's vast commercial networks, personal protection for nervous merchants, information gathering for corporate rivals, debt collection for loan sharks too afraid to do their own dirty work. Nothing that suggested special capabilities or dangerous knowledge. Yet the man's clients all paid well above market rates, suggesting his services were worth the premium. 3 days of careful surveillance finally yielded results. Marcus Chen had rented a small apartment in one of Tau Ceti Prime's mid-level residential districts. The building sat between a Zalani textile market and a Korthak protein farm, unremarkable except for its excellent escape routes. Zektar studied the target through enhanced optics from a building across the street. Chen appeared exactly as his file indicated, average height for a human, brown hair beginning to gray at the temples, no obvious cybernetic enhancements. He wore simple clothes and moved with the casual awareness of someone who'd seen combat, but wasn't expecting trouble. The hunter's instincts whispered warnings. After 3 centuries of killing, Zektar had learned to trust those whispers. Something about Marcus Chen felt wrong, like a trap disguised as easy prey, but the payment chip in his pocket represented more wealth than most beings saw in a lifetime. Sometimes the biggest rewards required the greatest risks. Zektar planned his approach with the methodical precision that had kept him alive across 47 star systems. Chen's apartment occupied the building's 3rd floor, accessible through the main entrance or a service ladder on the west side. Security systems were minimal, designed more to deter petty criminals than serious predators. The hunter waited until the local sun set, plunging the district into the purple twilight common to worlds orbiting older stars. Chen was home, his heat signature visible through the building's basic insulation, alone, apparently unarmed, presenting the perfect opportunity for a quick kill. Zektar scaled the service ladder with the silent grace of his ancestors, cybernetic enhancements dampening even the whisper of claws against metal. His weapon systems powered up automatically, targeting lasers painting every possible angle of attack. Whatever Marcus Chen's secret was, he wouldn't live long enough to use it. The apartment's window yielded to Zektar's electronic lockpicks in seconds. He slipped inside, every sense alert for signs of alarm or ambush. The living space was spartanly furnished, a few pieces of basic furniture, some personal items that suggested human cultural attachments, nothing that screamed hidden danger. Marcus Chen sat at a small table near the kitchen, back turned to the window, apparently absorbed in reading something on a handheld device. He didn't react to Zektar's entrance, didn't show any awareness that 8 feet of heavily armed predator had just invaded his home. Marcus Chen, Zektar announced himself, weapon systems locking onto the human's vital signs. Professional courtesy demanded he at least confirm the target's identity before killing him. The human turned slowly in his chair, and Zektar got his first clear look at the man's face. Brown eyes, unremarkable features, a slight smile that seemed oddly inappropriate given the circumstances. No fear, no surprise, no recognition that death had just walked through his window. "I was wondering when you'd show up," Marcus said conversationally, setting down his device, "though I expected someone a bit more dramatic, the reputation and all." The casual response sent warning signals cascading through Zektar's neural network. Targets weren't supposed to be expecting him. His approach had been perfect, his surveillance undetectable. How had this unremarkable human known he was coming? "You're remarkably calm for someone about to die," Zektar growled, his translator converting the words while his weapons remained locked on target. Marcus shrugged, a gesture that somehow managed to convey both resignation and amusement. "Death comes for everyone eventually. The only question is whether we meet it with dignity or terror." Something in the human's tone made Zektar hesitate. In 3 centuries of hunting, he'd heard every possible response to imminent death. Pleading, bargaining, defiance, rage, he'd seen them all. But this quiet acceptance was something new, and new things made him nervous. "Your employers were very specific," Zektar said, fighting the unexpected urge to explain himself. "No conversation. Quick death. Clean exit." "Ah," Marcus nodded as if confirming something he'd already suspected. "So they sent you after me without telling you why. Typical. They're afraid of what might happen if you knew the whole truth." "Truth is irrelevant," Zektar snarled, though his finger hesitated on the trigger. "I complete contracts." Marcus stood slowly, hands visible and empty, moving with the kind of careful control that suggested military training despite his unremarkable file. "Have you ever wondered why humans are so new to galactic society? Why a species that developed faster than light travel only made contact 2 years ago?" The question caught Zektar off guard. He'd never really considered humanity's late arrival on the galactic stage. New species emerged from their homeworlds all the time, usually when they achieved sufficient technology or were discovered by exploration fleets. "Irrelevant," he repeated, though his certainty wavered slightly. "We've been watching you," Marcus continued, taking a single step forward. "All of you. Every species, every civilization, every alliance and war and treaty. For over 200 years we've been out here, invisible and patient, learning everything we could about our galactic neighbors." The words hit Zektar like a plasma bolt. 200 years? That would mean humans had developed interstellar travel long before first contact, had been operating in galactic space without anyone knowing. But that was impossible. The galactic sensor networks would have detected them. "You're lying," Zektar said, though his voice lacked conviction. Marcus smiled, and for the first time, Zektar caught a glimpse of something predatory in the human's expression. "We're very good at hiding, Zektar. We've had to be. See, we learned something disturbing during our surveillance. Something about what happens to species that show too much promise too quickly." The hunter's blood ran cold as implications crashed through his mind. Species that developed too fast, that posed potential threats to established powers, had a tendency to suffer unfortunate accidents, plagues, civil wars, asteroid impacts. The galaxy was a dangerous place for civilizations that grew too strong too quickly. "The Hegemony Council maintains balance," Marcus said, reading Zektar's expression with disturbing accuracy. "They decide which species get to join the galactic community and which ones pose too great a risk. We've been watching their interventions for decades." Zektar's weapon system suddenly felt very inadequate. If what this human was saying was true, if humanity had been operating in secret for 2 centuries, observing and learning, then they were far more advanced than their public technology suggested. "So we waited," Marcus continued. "We let them think they discovered us. We pretended to be primitive newcomers, grateful for the chance to join galactic civilization. And all the while, we kept watching." The human took another step forward, and this time Zektar felt the overwhelming urge to step back. "What are you?" Zektar whispered, his weapons still trained on Marcus but his confidence evaporating like atmosphere through a hull breach. Marcus Chen studied the massive predator with those unremarkable brown eyes, and Zektar finally understood what he was seeing. The same expression he wore when stalking prey. The patient, calculating gaze of an apex hunter who knew the outcome before the hunt began. "I'm what humans call a guardian," Marcus said simply. "We've been placed throughout galactic society to watch and protect our people's interests. There are more of us than you might think, and fewer than you might hope." The human moved to a cabinet beside his kitchen, and every instinct screamed at Zektar to fire. But something kept his finger frozen on the trigger. Marcus opened the cabinet with casual disregard for the weapons pointed at him and withdrew a bottle of amber liquid. "Earth whiskey," Marcus explained, setting 2 glasses on the table. "Figured you might need a drink when you heard the rest of the story." "What rest?" Zektar demanded, though he found himself genuinely curious despite his situation. Marcus poured the whiskey with steady hands. "The part where I tell you why they really want me dead. And why you're never going to leave this room alive if you pull that trigger." The threat was delivered with the same conversational tone someone might use to discuss the weather, but it sent ice through Zektar's veins. In 300 years of hunting, he'd never encountered a target who spoke to him like this, as if he were the prey instead of the predator. "You're bluffing," Zektar growled. But his certainty continued to crumble. Marcus lifted one of the glasses and took a sip, savoring the liquor before responding. "3 days ago, someone hired you to kill me. They paid you enough to retire comfortably, which suggests they really want me dead, but they didn't tell you why, which suggests they were afraid of what you might do with that information." The logic was sound, and that terrified Zektar more than any weapon could have. "Continue." "I discovered something about the Hegemony Council's latest intervention," Marcus said, settling back into his chair as if this were a social visit instead of an assassination attempt. "A species called the Cathara, from the galactic rim. Brilliant scientists, peaceful culture, incredible potential for advancement." Zektar had heard of the Cathara. Their homeworld had suffered a devastating plague 6 months ago, wiping out 90% of their population. A tragedy, but hardly uncommon in the dangerous galaxy. "The plague wasn't natural," Marcus continued, reading Zektar's thoughts with unsettling accuracy. "It was engineered by hegemony bioweapons specialists and delivered through contaminated trade goods. The Cathara were eliminated because their technology was advancing too quickly." The revelation hit Zektar like a physical blow. The Hegemony Council maintained galactic peace and stability, protecting established civilizations from the chaos that had once torn the galaxy apart. They were the guardians of order, not genocidal conspirators. "You have proof?" Zektar asked, though part of him didn't want to hear the answer. Marcus gestured to the device he'd been reading when Zektar entered. Complete documentation, communication logs between council members, financial records showing payments to the bioweapons lab, surveillance footage of the delivery. Everything needed to expose the truth. The hunter's mind raced through implications. If the Hegemony Council was secretly eliminating promising species, if they were maintaining power through genocide rather than governance, then everything he understood about galactic civilization was a lie. Why tell me this? Zektar demanded. Why not simply kill me when I came through that window? Because you have a choice to make, Marcus said, downing the rest of his whiskey. You can complete your contract, kill me, and collect your payment. Live comfortably on some pleasure world while the galaxy continues its slow spiral into authoritarian control. The human stood again, moving with that same unnerving grace. Or you can help me get this information to the independent news networks. Expose the truth about what the hegemony really is. Give the galaxy a chance to choose its own future. Zektar's enhanced brain processed the options at superhuman speed. Killing Marcus would be simple enough despite the human's disturbing confidence. The payment would fund a comfortable retirement far from galactic politics and their consequences. But something nagged at him. In 3 centuries of hunting, he'd never questioned his client's motives. He killed for money, clean and simple. Yet now he found himself wondering about all those contracts, all those targets. How many had been silenced for knowing too much? How many had died to protect secrets that would horrify the galaxy? What makes you think I care about galactic freedom? Zektar asked. I'm a killer for hire, not a revolutionary. Marcus smiled, and this time the expression was genuinely warm. Because you've been asking yourself the same questions for longer than you want to admit. Why are the most dangerous contracts always about information? Why do the highest-paying clients always want silence instead of simple death? You're too smart not to have noticed the patterns. The human was right, and Zektar hated him for it. Over the decades, he'd begun to see those patterns. Targets who claimed to have evidence of corruption, scientists who'd made inconvenient discoveries, whistleblowers who'd tried to expose hidden truths, always silenced, always forgotten. You're asking me to throw away everything, Zektar said finally. My reputation, my wealth, my future. All for information that might not even matter. I'm asking you to help save the galaxy from becoming a tomb, Marcus replied. The hegemony isn't interested in balance anymore. They want control, absolute, eternal control, and they'll kill anyone who threatens that vision. The apartment fell silent except for the distant hum of the building's life support systems. Zektar stood frozen between 2 possible futures. His weapon still trained on a target who seemed utterly unconcerned about dying. If I help you, Zektar said slowly, they'll send others after us. Better hunters. More resources. We'll be marked for death across the galaxy. Marcus nodded gravely. Probably. Though you might be surprised how many beings are willing to fight once they learn the truth. The galaxy is full of species who've lost friends to accidents and plagues. They're just waiting for proof. The hunter's finger tightened on the trigger, then relaxed. 300 years of killing had taught him to read people, to understand their motivations and fears. Marcus Chen showed no fear, only grim determination. Either he was the best actor in the galaxy, or he genuinely believed this information was worth dying for. Show me the proof, Zektar said finally, lowering his weapons. Marcus's smile widened into something approaching joy. I was hoping you'd say that. The human retrieved his device and activated its holoprojector. Images filled the air between them. Communication logs, financial transfers, surveillance footage of hegemony agents delivering contaminated supplies to Cathara colonies. The evidence was overwhelming, undeniable, and absolutely damning. My God, Zektar breathed, his translator struggling with the phrase's emotional weight. Now you understand why they want me dead, Marcus said grimly, and why you're the 5th assassin they've sent after me. That stopped Zektar cold. 5th? Marcus gestured to another cabinet, this one containing 4 sets of personal effects, weapons, data pads, identification cards from species across the galaxy, trophies from dead hunters. They were all very good, Marcus said conversationally. The Vixari shadow dancer lasted almost 3 hours. The crystalline thought killer actually managed to wound me before I put him down. Zektar's blood froze as he realized the true scope of his situation. This wasn't a simple assassination contract. This was a test, and he was the latest predator being measured against human capabilities. What are you people? He whispered again. Marcus Chen smiled one final time, and now Zektar could see the predator lurking behind those unremarkable brown eyes. "We're the species that learned to hunt the hunters," Marcus said simply. "And you've just chosen which side of that equation you want to be on." The next 12 hours changed everything Zektar thought he knew about humans and their place in galactic society. Marcus led him through a hidden network that existed in the spaces between official civilization, a shadow infrastructure that had been growing for 2 centuries. They started in the apartment's basement, where Marcus revealed a concealed transport pad connected to what he called the Underground Railroad. The name meant nothing to Zektar, but the technology was impressive. Quantum tunneling networks that bypassed conventional sensors, communication arrays that piggyback on legitimate transmissions, safe houses hidden in plain sight across dozens of star systems. "How many of you are there?" Zektar asked as they materialized in a warehouse on the other side of Tau Ceti Prime. "Enough," Marcus replied, leading him through corridors lined with supplies and equipment. "We've been preparing for this day since we first learned about the hegemony's true nature." The warehouse buzzed with activity. Humans worked alongside beings from species Zektar didn't recognize, all moving with the purposeful efficiency of a military operation. Weapons were cleaned and checked, data packets encrypted and transmitted, escape routes planned and rehearsed. "Not just humans," Zektar observed, watching a 6-armed hexarch calibrate what looked like a military-grade sensor array. "Survivors," Marcus corrected, "species that were supposed to be extinct. Individuals who escaped the hegemony's interventions. We've been collecting them for decades, giving them new identities, new purposes." They stopped at a command center where holographic displays showed star maps, communication networks, and surveillance data from across the galaxy. A human woman with silver hair and scars across her left cheek looked up from a tactical display. "Status report," she said without preamble, her eyes never leaving Zektar's weapons. "The hunter chose correctly," Marcus replied. "Commander Sarah Chen meets Zektar the Ruthless, our newest ally." Sarah Chen studied the massive Saurian with the same calculating gaze her brother had shown. "You're the one they sent to kill Marcus." "What changed your mind?" "The truth," Zektar said simply, "and the realization that I've been a tool for genocide without knowing it." Sarah nodded slowly, apparently satisfied with his answer. "How many contracts have you taken from hegemony intermediaries?" The question hit harder than Zektar expected. He'd never tracked his employers that carefully, focusing on payment rather than politics. But now, thinking back across decades of kills, patterns emerged that made his enhanced stomach clench. "Too many," he admitted. "Scientists, whistleblowers, journalists. Always for personal reasons, never political. They've been using independent contractors for the subtle work," Sarah explained, turning back to her displays, keeping their hands clean while eliminating inconvenient voices. "You're not the only one who's been manipulated." She gestured to another section of the warehouse where beings from dozens of species worked together on various projects. "Half our recruits are former hegemony assets who learned the truth about their missions." Marcus guided Zektar to a briefing table where the full scope of the human resistance became clear. They weren't just hiding and gathering information. They were building a network capable of challenging the hegemony's control across the galaxy. "The plan is elegant in its simplicity," Marcus explained, spreading holographic documents across the table. "Simultaneous revelation across every major news network, every independent communication system, every diplomatic channel. Make the truth impossible to suppress or deny." "What about retaliation?" Zektar asked. "The hegemony won't simply accept exposure. They'll use their military assets to maintain control." Sarah joined them at the table, her expression grim. "They'll try. But we've spent 2 centuries studying their strategies and capabilities. Plus, we have advantages they don't know about." She activated another display showing ship movements throughout the galaxy. Most appeared to be normal commercial traffic, but Zektar's enhanced vision detected subtle patterns. Coordination that suggested military planning. "You have a fleet," he realized. "We have the largest fleet in galactic history," Marcus said quietly. "Hidden in plain sight, disguised as everything from cargo haulers to exploration vessels. 200 years of careful positioning and preparation." The implications staggered Zektar. Humans hadn't just been observing galactic civilization, they'd been infiltrating it, preparing for the day when they would need to fight for their survival and the freedom of other species. "Why now?" he asked. Why reveal yourselves after so long in hiding? Sarah's expression darkened. Because the hegemony is accelerating their timeline. The Cathera were just the beginning. Intelligence suggests they're planning to eliminate 6 more species within the next galactic year. She highlighted star systems on the display, each one home to billions of sentient beings who had no idea their civilizations were marked for death. Species whose only crime was developing too quickly or asking inconvenient questions. We can't stand by and watch genocide on that scale, Marcus added, even if exposure means the end of our covert operations. Zektar studied the tactical displays, his hunter's instincts analyzing the strategic situation. The human network was impressive, but the hegemony controlled established military forces across hundreds of star systems. This wouldn't be a simple revelation of truth. It would be a war that could tear the galaxy apart. You realize what you're starting, he said finally. The hegemony won't go quietly. They'll paint you as terrorists, invaders, threats to galactic stability. Let them, Sarah said fiercely. The truth is more powerful than their propaganda. Species across the galaxy have been questioning the convenient accidents and plagues. They're ready to listen to alternatives. A communication alert chimed across the command center. Sarah activated the incoming message and a holographic figure materialized above the table, another human. This one broadcasting from what looked like a ship's bridge. Sarah, Marcus, the figure said urgently. We've got problems. Hegemony fleet movements in the Rigel sector. They're positioning for another intervention. Which system? Marcus asked, though his expression suggested he already knew the answer. Andorian Prime. The whole damn system is about to get sterilized. Zektar knew the Andorians, peaceful philosophers who'd recently made breakthroughs in quantum consciousness research. Their discoveries had implications for faster-than-light communication and artificial intelligence that would revolutionize galactic civilization. How long do we have? Sarah demanded. 48 hours, maybe less. The plague ships are already in hyperspace. The command center erupted into controlled chaos as personnel began implementing emergency protocols. Zektar watched the humans and their allies work with military precision, every movement purposeful and coordinated. This is it, Marcus said, turning to face the massive Saurian. Decision time. Help us stop the Andorian intervention, and we reveal everything. The galaxy learns the truth about the hegemony whether we're ready or not. And if we fail? Zektar asked. Then billions of innocent beings die and the hegemony's grip on power becomes unbreakable, Sarah replied grimly. No pressure. Zektar's enhanced brain processed the situation at superhuman speed. Every instinct told him to walk away, to collect his payment and disappear into comfortable retirement. But he kept seeing those tactical displays, those lists of species marked for elimination. 300 years of hunting had taught him to recognize predators. The hegemony wasn't interested in balance or stability. They were apex predators eliminating competition, and they'd been using beings like him to clean up the evidence. What do you need me to do? He asked finally. Marcus smiled, the expression containing equal parts relief and determination. Help us save the Andorians, then help us save the galaxy. As Zektar nodded his agreement, alarms began sounding throughout the warehouse. Sarah's tactical displays lit up with incoming threats as hegemony forces began moving toward Tau Ceti Prime. They know, she announced grimly. Someone told them about our operation here. The warehouse erupted into evacuation procedures as personnel began destroying sensitive equipment and escaping through hidden routes. Zektar found himself swept up in the controlled chaos, following Marcus toward what looked like a concealed ship hangar. Time to find out what humans can really do when we stop hiding, Marcus said as they ran. Behind them, the first hegemony assault ships dropped out of hyperspace above Tau Ceti Prime. The ship that Marcus led him to defied every assumption Zektar had made about human technology. From the outside, it looked like a standard civilian transport, the kind used for interstellar cargo runs and passenger service. But the moment they crossed the threshold, the facade dropped away. Military-grade armor lined the corridors. Weapon systems that belonged on capital ships were integrated seamlessly into the civilian shell. The engine readings on the displays showed power output that should have been impossible for a vessel that size. Stealth technology borrowed from 12 different species, Marcus explained as they made their way to the bridge. Some of them officially extinct thanks to the hegemony. The bridge itself was a work of art. combining the best elements of every major civilization's starship design. Korthak navigation systems interfaced with Zilani sensor arrays, while Vixari weapon control sat beside human engineering displays. Sarah Chen was already at the command station, her fingers dancing across holographic interfaces with the speed of someone who'd been doing this for decades. Around her, a mixed crew of humans and aliens worked with the seamless coordination of a veteran military unit. Status report, Marcus called as he took position at what Zektar assumed was the tactical station. Hegemony Task Force just achieved orbit, Sarah replied without looking up. 6 heavy cruisers, 12 frigates, and what looks like a carrier group. They're not taking any chances. Through the bridge's main view screen, Zektar could see the enemy ships taking position above Tau Ceti Prime. Even from this distance, their weapon signatures were impressive enough to glass the planet's surface if they chose to. Are they here for the warehouse? He asked. They're here for me, Marcus said grimly. Someone leaked my location to the Hegemony, probably the same person who hired you to kill me. That revelation sent ice through Zektar's veins. The mysterious human who'd approached him in the cantina hadn't been a client. They'd been bait, drawing him to Marcus's location so the Hegemony could track him. A trap within a trap, Sarah observed. Classic Hegemony strategy. Use one asset to locate another, then eliminate both. Alarms sounded throughout the ship as proximity sensors detected incoming threats. The main display shifted to show 3 Hegemony frigates burning hard toward their position. Weapons powering up for attack runs. So much for staying hidden, Marcus muttered, his hands moving across tactical controls with fluid precision. All stations, prepare for combat. Zektar watched in fascination as the ship's disguise fell away completely. Armor plating shifted to reveal weapon ports. Sensor arrays unfolded from concealed compartments. Engine output climbed to levels that should have torn a civilian vessel apart. What is this ship? He asked, grabbing a support rail as the first enemy salvo rocked their position. This is the Shadow of Earth, Sarah said, her voice carrying a mixture of pride and determination. One of 50 Phantom-class vessels built in secret over the past 50 years. The return fire from their ship was devastating. Weapons that Zektar didn't recognize tore through the lead frigate's shields and armor like tissue paper. The enemy vessel exploded in a ball of superheated plasma that lit up the surrounding space. Human weapons technology, Marcus explained, anticipating his question. We've had 2 centuries to study everyone else's designs and improve on them. The surviving frigates broke off their attack run, falling back toward the main Hegemony fleet. But more ships were already moving to intercept the Shadow of Earth, and Zektar could see additional vessels dropping out of hyperspace as reinforcements arrived. We can't fight the entire task force, he pointed out, watching the tactical display with growing concern. We don't need to, Sarah said, executing a series of maneuvers that should have been impossible for a ship that size. We just need to reach the Andorian system before the Hegemony plague ships arrive. The Shadow of Earth accelerated toward the edge of the system, dodging pursuit with an agility that defied physics. Behind them, the Hegemony ships struggled to keep pace, their conventional designs no match for whatever propulsion system the humans had developed. Hyperspace window opening, announced the navigation officer, a young human woman whose hands moved across her controls with inhuman speed. Jump coordinates locked for Andorian Prime. What about the other resistance cells? Zektar asked. The beings in the warehouse? Already evacuated, Marcus replied. We've been planning for this day for decades. Everyone knows their contingency protocols. The ship shuddered as it entered hyperspace, leaving the pursuing Hegemony forces behind. In the strange non-light of faster-than-light travel, the main screen showed their estimated arrival time at the Andorian system. 18 hours, Sarah announced. Cutting it close, but we should arrive before the plague ships. Marcus activated a communication array and began broadcasting on frequencies that Zektar didn't recognize. Within minutes, responses came back from across the galaxy. Human voices, alien languages, all confirming receipt of activation protocols. The network is responding, Marcus reported. Resistance cells in 37 star systems are moving to Phase 2. Which is? Zektar asked. Sarah smiled, and for the first time since he'd met her, the expression contained genuine warmth. We stop hiding. Every Phantom-class ship, every concealed base, every sleeper agent reveals themselves simultaneously. The galaxy learns that humans aren't helpless newcomers. The implications staggered Zektar. For 2 centuries, humanity had been building a secret military infrastructure that spanned the galaxy. Ships like the Shadow of Earth, hidden bases, covert operatives embedded in every major civilization. It was the largest intelligence operation in galactic history. The hegemony is about to discover they've been infiltrated by the species they considered least threatening, Marcus added with grim satisfaction. Over the next several hours, reports flooded in from across the galaxy. Human ships were revealing themselves in dozens of star systems, their true capabilities shocking local governments and military commanders. Resistance cells were broadcasting evidence of hegemony atrocities on every available communication channel. But the most stunning revelation came from the galactic core, where a massive fleet of human warships dropped their cloaking fields simultaneously. Hundreds of vessels that had been hiding in plain sight for decades, disguised as everything from mining platforms to research stations. My God, Zektar breathed, watching the tactical displays update with new contact information. You've been preparing for war since first contact. We've been preparing for survival, Sarah corrected. We learned early that the galaxy wasn't the peaceful federation it pretended to be. Species that threaten the established order tend to suffer accidents. The communication array chimed with an incoming priority transmission. The holographic figure that materialized was elderly for a human, with gray hair and the kind of scars that spoke of personal combat experience. Admiral Chen, Sarah said, snapping to attention despite being on her own bridge. Status report, Commander, the figure requested, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. Phase 2 is proceeding on schedule, sir. All resistance cells have activated. The Andorian intervention is still on track, but we should arrive in time to intercept. Understood. Be advised that hegemony forces are mobilizing across the galaxy. They're not going to let this revelation stand unchallenged. Are we ready for full-scale war? Marcus asked. The Admiral's expression was grim but determined. We've been ready for 200 years. The question is whether the galaxy is ready to learn the truth about its supposed protectors. As if summoned by his words, new alerts began flashing across the tactical displays. Hegemony fleets were moving throughout galactic space, abandoning their usual subtlety in favor of overwhelming force. The shadow war that had existed for decades was about to become very public. All human forces. This is Admiral Chen, the transmission continued, broadcasting on networks that Zektar was only now realizing existed. Operation Revelation is now active. Show them what we really are. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge of the Shadow of Earth in tense silence. Through the view screen, hyperspace continued its strange dance of non-light and impossible distances. In a few hours they would arrive at the Andorian system to confront the hegemony's genocide fleet. No going back now, Marcus said quietly. Was there ever? Sarah replied, her hands never leaving her controls. Zektar studied the humans around him, finally understanding what he was seeing. These weren't desperate rebels or naive idealists. They were apex predators who had been hiding among their prey for 2 centuries, learning weaknesses and planning the perfect strike. The galaxy was about to discover that humanity's greatest strength wasn't their technology or their ships. It was their patience, and their patience had just run out. The Andorian system appeared around them like a jewel scattered across black velvet. 3 inhabited worlds orbited a stable yellow star, their surfaces teeming with billions of peaceful philosophers who had no idea death was racing toward them through the void. Hegemony plague ships, the sensor officer announced grimly. 4 vessels approaching the 3rd planet. Estimated time to orbital insertion, 6 hours. Zektar studied the tactical display with professional interest. The plague ships were converted freighters, designed to look like standard cargo vessels until they began dispersing their deadly payload. Elegant in their simplicity, horrifying in their purpose. What's our approach? He asked, settling into the combat chair that Sarah had assigned him. Direct confrontation, Marcus replied, his fingers dancing across weapon control interfaces. We can't risk letting even one of those ships reach the planet. 4 against 1, Zektar observed. Poor odds. Sarah smiled, and there was something predatory in her expression that reminded him uncomfortably of his own reflection. Not 1. Look again. The sensor display updated, revealing contacts that had been hidden by some form of advanced stealth technology. 3 more ships materialized on the screen, closing on the plague fleet from different vectors. All bore the same impossible mix of civilian appearance and military capability as the Shadow of Earth. Phantom Squadron, Marcus announced with satisfaction. We've been coordinating this intercept for months. The lead plague ship apparently detected the approaching human vessels because it began broadcasting on hegemony military frequencies. Within minutes, the sensor display lit up with new contacts as a protection fleet dropped out of hyperspace. 8 heavy cruisers, the sensor officer reported. Looks like they were expecting trouble. Zektar's enhanced vision analyzed the enemy formation with professional appreciation. The hegemony commander had positioned his ships to protect the plague vessels, while maintaining maximum firepower concentration, a textbook defensive arrangement that should have been nearly impossible to break. Should have brought more ships, Sarah observed, apparently unconcerned by the odds. We did, Marcus said, activating another communication channel. Phantom Squadron, this is Shadow Leader. Execute Protocol 7. The space around the Andorian system suddenly filled with new contacts as dozens of human ships dropped their cloaking fields. Vessels that had been hiding in asteroid fields behind moons, even within the outer system's gas giants, revealed themselves simultaneously. What the hell? The hegemony fleet commander's voice came through on an open channel, his translator struggling with what sounded like panic. Surprise, Sarah said sweetly, opening a response channel. This is Commander Chen of the Terran Liberation Fleet. You are ordered to withdraw from Andorian space immediately. Terran Liberation Fleet? Zektar asked. We figured it was time to stop pretending we didn't have a military, Marcus explained, his attention focused on weapon targeting systems. The hegemony response was predictable. The heavy cruisers opened fire on the nearest human vessels, their plasma cannons and particle beams lighting up the void with deadly brilliance. But the human ships moved with an agility that defied their apparent size, dodging attacks that should have been impossible to avoid. Return fire, Sarah ordered calmly. The weapons that emerged from the human ships were unlike anything Zektar had seen in 3 centuries of violence. Coherent energy beams that cut through enemy shields like they weren't there. Kinetic projectiles that moved at significant fractions of light speed. Exotic weapons that seemed to bend space itself around their targets. The lead hegemony cruiser simply vanished, consumed by energies that Zektar's enhanced vision couldn't properly analyze. The second ship broke apart as kinetic rounds tore through its hull from impossible angles. The third suffered what looked like a complete gravitational collapse, imploding into a sphere of twisted metal and screaming energy. How? Zektar whispered, watching destruction that challenged his understanding of physics. 200 years of research and development, Marcus said, targeting another enemy vessel. We've been very busy while everyone thought we were primitive. The remaining hegemony ships began falling back, their formation disintegrating under weapons fire that seemed to come from everywhere at once. But the plague ships continued their approach to Andorian Prime, their crews apparently willing to complete their mission even if it meant certain death. Not happening, Sarah growled, pushing the shadow of Earth into an intercept course that should have torn the ship apart. What followed was less a battle than a demonstration. The human ships moved through space like living things, their weapons reaching out to touch targets across impossible distances. The plague ships, designed for stealth rather than combat, stood no chance against coordinated fire from vessels that could apparently bend the laws of physics to their will. All plague vessels destroyed, the sensor officer reported with satisfaction. The Andorians are safe. But their victory celebration was cut short by new alerts flooding the communication array. Reports were coming in from across the galaxy as the full scope of Operation Revelation became clear. Human fleets were engaging hegemony forces in dozens of star systems. Ancient alien technologies, thought lost when their creators suffered convenient extinctions, were being deployed by human ships against the forces that had destroyed their original owners. Status report from the Galactic Core, Marcus announced, reading incoming transmissions. Admiral Chen's fleet has taken control of 3 major hegemony installations. They're broadcasting evidence of the genocide programs on every available frequency. Zektar watched the tactical displays with growing amazement. The humans weren't just fighting a defensive war. They were dismantling the hegemony's power structure piece by piece, revealing corruption and atrocities that had been hidden for centuries. How long have you been planning this? He asked. Since the day we learned what happened to the Makers, Sarah replied grimly. The name meant nothing to Zektar, but something in her tone suggested it should. Who were the Makers? The first species to achieve true artificial intelligence, Marcus explained, his attention split between weapon controls and incoming communications. Peaceful scientists who wanted to share their discoveries with the galaxy. The hegemony declared them a threat to biological life and sterilized their homeworld 300 years ago. Before you were even spacefaring, Zektar realized. We found their ruins when we first left Earth, Sarah continued. Automated systems that were still trying to broadcast warnings about the hegemony's true nature. They'd been sending distress signals for centuries, but no one was listening. The implications hit Zektar like a physical blow. Humanity's secret development hadn't been driven by paranoia or aggression. It had been motivated by the discovery that the galaxy's supposed protectors were actually its greatest threat. You've been preparing for this war since first contact, he said, understanding finally dawning. We've been preparing to survive, Marcus corrected. The war was always inevitable. The hegemony would never allow a species like humanity to exist openly. New alerts began flashing across the displays as hegemony reinforcements arrived in the system. Massive dreadnoughts that dwarfed even the human ships, armed with weapons capable of cracking planets. The peaceful Andorian system was about to become a major battleground. Time to see if our preparations were enough, Sarah said, as enemy vessels began targeting their position. But instead of retreating, the human ships moved into attack formation with the confidence of predators who had finally revealed their true nature, whatever technology they had developed during their secret centuries. They clearly believed it was sufficient to challenge the hegemony's military might. All ships. This is Shadow Leader, Sarah broadcast on the fleet frequency. Show them what happens when you hunt humans. The response was immediate and devastating. The human fleet moved as one organism, their weapons reaching out to touch targets that should have been beyond their range. Space itself seemed to bend around their ships as they demonstrated capabilities that redefined what was possible in stellar warfare. Zektar watched in stunned silence as the galaxy's deadliest predator species revealed why they had remained hidden for so long. They hadn't been afraid of the hegemony's power. They had been waiting for the perfect moment to demonstrate their own. The hegemony dreadnoughts, pride of their fleet and terror of 1,000 worlds, began dying under weapons fire that came from ships they had dismissed as primitive. The humans weren't just fighting back, they were winning. And across the galaxy, other species were beginning to understand that the balance of power had just shifted permanently. The age of hegemony dominance was ending, destroyed by the patient fury of a species that had learned to hunt the hunters. The Andorian system burned with the light of dying warships, but for the first time in centuries, it was the oppressors who were dying. 6 months later, Zektar stood in what had once been the Hegemony Council chambers on the capital world of Centralis Prime. The massive amphitheater, designed to intimidate representatives from lesser species, now hosted a very different kind of gathering. The Galactic Liberation Assembly included delegates from over 200 species, many of them supposedly extinct according to official records, survivors of hegemony interventions who had been hiding in human-protected enclaves for decades, waiting for the day when they could reclaim their rightful place in galactic civilization. The Cathera delegation recognizes the speaker from Andorian Prime, announced the session moderator, an elderly human woman whose calm authority had somehow brought order to the chaos of galactic revolution. Zektar listened as the Andorian philosopher spoke about freedom and the responsibility that came with knowledge. 6 months ago, these beings had been hours away from extinction. Now they were helping to write the charter for a new galactic government based on cooperation rather than domination. The transformation still amazed him. The hegemony's military forces, once the terror of the galaxy, had crumbled within weeks of humanity's revelation. Not because human weapons were superior, though they certainly were, but because the truth about hegemony atrocities had turned their own member species against them. When the evidence of systematic genocide became impossible to deny, hegemony worlds had risen in revolt. Military commanders had defected with entire fleets. The careful system of control that had maintained galactic stability for millennia had collapsed like a house of cards in a hurricane. Former Hunter Zektar, the moderator called, drawing his attention back to the proceedings. The Assembly recognizes your request to address the delegates. He rose from his seat and walked to the speaker's platform, acutely aware of the hundreds of beings watching him. Many knew his reputation. Some had lost friends or family to his weapons. Yet they listened as he began to speak. 6 months ago, I was the galaxy's most expensive killer, Zektar said, his translator rendering the words in dozens of languages simultaneously. I believed I was a professional, taking contracts based on payment rather than politics. I thought I was above the petty concerns of governments and ideologies. He paused, looking out across the assembly at the faces of species he had never expected to see, beings whose worlds had been declared lost to plagues or civil wars, but who had actually been evacuated by human rescue operations before hegemony sterilization fleets arrived. I was wrong, he continued. There is no neutrality when genocide is the price of ignorance. There is no professionalism when your skills are used to silence truth. I stand before you today not as Zektar the Ruthless, but as someone who learned that redemption requires action, not just regret. The response was mixed, as he had expected. Some delegates applauded, others remained silent, and a few showed open hostility. He didn't blame them. Words were easy. Proving his commitment to the new galactic order would take time and effort, but he had time now. The Liberation Fleet had dissolved his old contracts and frozen his accounts, though they had offered him a new position that actually paid better than assassination. Chief Security Advisor to the Assembly, responsible for protecting delegates from the remnants of hegemony forces that still operated in the Outer Rim. It was ironic, really. The galaxy's deadliest predator had become its protector. After the session ended, Zektar found himself on one of the building's observation decks, looking out over a city that was transforming as rapidly as the galaxy itself. Hegemony monuments were being replaced with memorials to extinct species. Propaganda centers had become schools where young beings learned the true history of galactic civilization. Brooding again? Marcus Chen asked, joining him at the railing. Thinking, Zektar corrected, about how many targets I eliminated who were probably trying to expose the truth. The past can't be changed, Marcus said pragmatically, but the future can be shaped by what we do now. They stood in comfortable silence, watching ships from dozens of species landing and departing from the spaceport below. Trade routes that had been monopolized by hegemony corporations were opening to independent operators. Technologies that had been suppressed for security reasons were being shared freely. Any word from the Outer Rim? Zektar asked. Admiral Chen's forces are still hunting down the last hegemony holdouts, Marcus replied. There are rumors of a secret facility in the Void Nebula, where they're trying to develop new bioweapons, but we haven't confirmed the location yet. Zektar nodded. The transition hadn't been bloodless, despite humanity's overwhelming technological advantage. Hegemony loyalists had retreated to the galaxy's most remote regions, where they continued their genocidal programs while planning an eventual counterattack. They'll try again, he said with certainty. The hegemony mindset doesn't accept defeat gracefully. Let them try, Marcus said with quiet confidence. The galaxy knows the truth now. No species will trust them again. A communication alert chimed from Marcus's personal device. He checked the message and smiled, the expression containing genuine warmth despite everything they had been through. Good news? Zektar asked. The best, Marcus replied. Sarah's ship just returned from the Maker ruins. They've successfully reactivated the ancient AI networks. The Makers are going to help us rebuild what the hegemony destroyed. The revelation sent a chill of anticipation through Zektar's enhanced nervous system. The Makers had been extinct for 3 centuries, but their artificial intelligence networks had survived in hidden installations across the galaxy. If humanity could restore them to full function, the combined knowledge of 2 advanced species would accelerate galactic recovery beyond all expectations. How long before they're fully operational? He asked. The Makers estimate 6 months for basic systems, 2 years for complete restoration, Marcus said. They're eager to resume their work, but they want to be careful about how quickly they reintroduce their technologies. Zektar understood their caution. Advanced artificial intelligence had been the excuse the hegemony used to justify the Makers' extermination. Even in the new galactic order, some species remained nervous about AI that could think and feel like biological beings. The assembly will need protection during the transition, he observed. Not everyone will welcome the changes we're making. Agreed, Marcus said. That's why we need beings like you, predators who choose to protect instead of destroy. Another ship landed at the spaceport below, this one bearing the markings of a species that Zektar had never seen before. According to the assembly records, They were survivors of a hegemony intervention that had supposedly destroyed their homeworld 50 years ago. In reality, human evacuation fleets had rescued millions of their people, who had been living in secret colonies ever since. Each day brought new revelations about the scope of humanity's shadow operations. Refugee populations that numbered in the billions, scientific research that had continued in hidden laboratories, cultural preservation programs that had maintained the knowledge and traditions of supposedly extinct civilizations. How many more are out there? Zektar asked, watching the newcomers emerge from their ship. Hundreds of thousands, maybe millions, Marcus replied. We couldn't save everyone, but we saved more than the hegemony realizes. Every species they thought they had eliminated completely will have survivors ready to reclaim their heritage. The implications were staggering. The new galactic civilization wouldn't just be different from the hegemony's authoritarian system. It would be vastly larger and more diverse, enriched by cultures and knowledge that had been thought lost forever. What about Earth? Zektar asked. When will your homeworld join the assembly openly? Marcus's expression grew thoughtful. Soon. The revelation has made it safe for Earth to reveal its true location and capabilities. Our people are tired of hiding. I'd like to see it someday, Zektar admitted. The world that produced such patient hunters. You will, Marcus promised. Earth welcomes visitors now, especially those who helped us save the galaxy. A gentle breeze stirred the air around them, carrying scents from the city's new gardens where plants from dozens of worlds grew together in carefully planned ecosystems. The hegemony had maintained strict biological segregation, but the assembly encouraged mixing and exchange between species. Do you ever regret it? Zektar asked suddenly. Giving up your hidden advantage to save others? Marcus considered the question carefully before answering. We were never meant to hide forever. Humans are social creatures at heart. We want to be part of something larger than ourselves, not separated from it. Even knowing the risks, the hegemony will reorganize eventually. They'll try to reclaim their power. Let them try, Marcus said with the same quiet confidence he had shown in his apartment on Tau Ceti Prime. The galaxy has learned to hunt the hunters now. We won't be caught off guard again. Zektar nodded, watching the sun set over a city that was rebuilding itself according to principles of cooperation rather than domination. Tomorrow would bring new challenges as the assembly worked to create institutions that could govern a galaxy without oppressing it. But tonight, for the first time in 3 centuries, Zektar felt something he had never experienced before. Hope. The galaxy's deadliest mercenary had spoken once. Never hunt.